elections officials.
Okay, now you're live.
Oh, now we're live. Okay, we're starting. Okay. Good evening. I'm Kim Coleman, candidate for Congress in Utah's 4th Congressional District, coming to you again by popular demand to do these Facebook Lives. I am running for Congress. And, Facebook Live and YouTube. So we are now hosted on YouTube. And what's our YouTube channel again? Kim for Utah is our YouTube. Kim Coleman. What is it? It's new. Okay, Kim Coleman. Okay, we're working all this out now because I can't come to you, and very hard for us to do some of your traditional campaigning. So we're looking for ways to come to your living room, and really we're getting great feedback that it's convenient for you. So you can choose when to watch this and when to interact with us. And we do have a really good habit of taking your questions later as you watch these videos later. So again, I am the front-running candidate that just came out of our Utah State Convention, Republican Convention. So some of the candidates were eliminated, and we're moving forward to a primary election. So I'm looking for all the support that I can get, and please reach out, ask your questions. Let's get to know each other. This is a little bit more strained than normal, but nevertheless, I'm available for you to reach out to and reach out to my campaign, kimforutah.com, and Facebook, YouTube channel. So I've been bringing in guests, and for one, it's just easier to have somebody to talk to in our social isolation, social distancing world. And so I'm really excited tonight that we have Amelia Powers Gardner now. She is the Utah County Clerk and Auditor. Is that what I heard? All right. And before I introduce her and let her take a moment here, something is missing on her end. She knows what she did wrong tonight. And because if we hashtag Baby G, then we would just have an out of control audience here. Where's that baby?
Where's Baby G?
Where's Baby G?
From a nap, just barely, so she was a little bit fussy, but I'm sure that as she gets a little less fussy, Tobin will bring her in for us. So towards the end, we'll bring in Baby G.
Okay, and then I'll be good. If I just get like a little bit of Baby G fix tonight. So anyway, Amelia, tell us about your life down in Utah County, which is also business-free Utah County, as we learned Saturday.
Yes. So Utah County, it's crazy when the state has now moved into like the orange phase of recovery from this COVID madness. And moving into the orange phase actually put Utah County at a higher level of restriction than we were currently at. So
Really?
Our county commissioners and our county attorney and our sheriff and all of us elected officials at the county level have really resisted doing a lockdown. We've really trusted our citizens to protect themselves and to help each other. And we've actually kept our rate of transmission of COVID-19 and hospitalizations have been very low for our population. So when the state decided to move into the orange phase, that actually became an order rather than a directive. And that order placed Utah County at a higher level of restriction than we previously had, which is just crazy to me. The recovery is harder for our businesses.
Wow. So we were both present at the Utah Business Revival on Saturday, which was really well attended down in Utah County and Vineyard. And Mayor Fulmer opened up her city to local small businesses and said, come sell stuff, and to the public, come buy stuff. And I bought stuff that day. And it was just great to see people out. And we were distanced. And I don't know that you can really tell that in some of the photos because cameras don't always take in depth. But, as I looked among the crowds, people were clustered in families, but still very separated. I did hug a few people. some have already actually had, David Levitt's already,
Yeah,
had coronavirus, and a
that
couple
was
others.
like for him because then his antibodies could rub off on me, and he had like a shield around him, right? So he was quite sick, but he was really sick. Didn't end up going to the hospital, weathered it at home, but was quite sick nonetheless for about 2 weeks, and has had a full recovery and now has immunity. So that's fantastic. And he was there, and you're right. I had my family there, and we were close in a family, but the crowds weren't right on top of each other.
Mm-mm.
A lot of families out with their kids were excited to be out for the first time. Love Mayor Fulmer. Julie Fulmer is the mayor of Vineyard, is fantastic, and she recognizes that her citizens they're in high density housing, so they most of them don't have a backyard that they can just send their kids out to play in, and she recognizes that her families are suffering. They're stuck in small high density housing apartments, and the businesses are suffering. And she just said, you know what, let's open it up. No one's forced to come, but if you want to come. And let's help our businesses. Let's help our families. I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
It was great. And it was on several acres, with lots more acres to expand. So, people were being careful. And, it really, the emphasis that day was on the businesses and making sure that our businesses can survive and continue to thrive. Before coronavirus, America was experiencing our strongest peacetime economy, maybe in the history of our country. And, because of that, I think we're in a better position to weather this than we might have been otherwise. But still, so many businesses really operate at the margins, and to have a hit like this is really hard. But, balancing that also with, there's a communicable disease that is really rough on people, and there is a death toll with this. But emphasis on our small businesses, but also on personal responsibility. And I know that's a big theme of yours. Even as a clerk, auditor, Amelia's been first and foremost a citizen activist, I guess. Are you okay with that expression?
Yeah, absolutely.
But Amelia's somebody that I've watched for a long time and kind of been in the trenches with as citizens, as members of the community, looking at problems and saying, we've got to make change, and really that grassroots activity, until finally she said, you know what, it's time that we get a change in the elected office. And so about the same time you looked at that, I was doing the same thing in the state house and said, yeah, we need a change in the state legislature too. So we're citizen activists, community activists turned, the people that get to make some of the decisions now on behalf of our communities. And so you've done amazing things, though. And Amelia just hit the ground running and is now nationally recognized for some real particular reforms and advancements and innovations in our election system. So can you talk about that? Because I just have to say, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud of your team that you have been that innovative. You didn't wait. You just went right in and said, we're getting to work, and we are going to turn the election system, turn a corner with security, with efficiency. So share with us why you needed to do that, and then tell us what you did.
So I want to go back a little bit to get there. Prior to coming into office, I was a small business consultant, and what I specialized in was taking people that had a passion and were really good at something and teaching them how to make a living doing that, taking their small business and teaching them how to do that. Like you said, you just said that, the margins are small in a lot of small businesses, and little tweaks make a huge difference. I think that's one reason I'm so passionate about what's happened with this shutdown, because these are my former clients, right? I was a business consultant, and my small businesses, little things make a huge difference, and shutting down or losing a huge portion of their business will decimate their families. Well, I did a lot of that through processes. A lot of what I did with my clients was teach them how to refine their processes And they would turn around and take an unprofitable business and make it incredibly profitable, and they could grow it significantly just by focusing on their processes. As you mentioned, we were both citizen activists, and we both worked with the community. And it was apparent to everybody that Utah County elections was just chaotic, right? The outcomes were crazy, and it wasn't corruption. It was just chaos. The governor called it the epicenter of dysfunction. Those were his literal words. He called it the epicenter of dysfunction.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I inherited the epicenter of dysfunction, and I ran against the incumbent, won. And when I came into office, I inherited his staff. So I inherited a staff of people that had been deemed the epicenter of dysfunction. They were all mad that I had run against their boss and basically taken his job. And as you mentioned, like, I didn't have time to sit around. Like, I had to hit the ground running, because in November, we have what's probably going to be the biggest election in our lifetimes. So we've got the biggest election in our lifetimes that's about to hit us. And I needed time to implement new systems and then refine those processes well enough that when I hit November of 2020, we've got a well-oiled machine.
Okay, so what was the dysfunction, though? What was wrong?
So the huge part of the dysfunction was the processes. And when I say, like, the processes, I can't narrow it down because every process was broken. The polling locations had 4 and 5 hour lines at the polling locations. The mail-in ballots, it took weeks to get results for mail-in ballots. We have the second largest county in the state, almost 750,000 people, over 300,000 active registered voters, and they were processing ballots by hand. They literally processed ballots in 2 buildings on 3 floors in 6 locations. So ballots would move back and forth between buildings, up and down elevators. And I mean, nothing was streamlined.
Nothing could go wrong there.
No, in fact, one of the employees told me that one day they were moving ballots and a windstorm came, and they were moving ballots on a cart between buildings, and it blew ballots, and they were like chasing them down. And I'm thinking, like,
okay.
I can't even fathom this. I came from the manufacturing world, right? So I literally made my entire election staff read The Toyota Way. I don't know if you've ever read The Toyota Way, but it talks about lean manufacturing, and it talks about how cutting out steps and being efficient. And on top of all of this, on top of the fact that we had, like, the most inefficient, crazy process that compromised security at every turn, on top of all of that, we have the lowest budget per voter in the state. So I had no budget and crazy processes. I didn't have an option but to hit the ground running, because I needed to implement things quickly enough that in November of 2020, you're not facing what the people running for your office in November of 2018 did. And that was literally like 4 and 5 hour lines in the 4th Congressional District.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. What was the actual impact of this dysfunction on the voter?
So imagine this. There is a 4+ hour line. You get in line at like 7 p.m. and you've got 2 kids under the age of 10, and they say, oh, you're not going to get to vote before midnight. You don't sit in line. And that race was within 700 votes. That's right. I can guarantee you more than 700 people got out of line and did not vote that day. On top of that, we're a vote by mail county, so we expect everybody to return their ballots by mail. But my predecessor hadn't updated the voter rolls actively in 7 years, since 2012. So a whole bunch of people never got their ballot. So then they're forced to go to the polling locations that now have 4 and 5 hour lines. I mean, we're talking potential of thousands of people whose vote was suppressed. You know, a lot of people like to talk about, like, election hacking. Well, I have to tell you, a vote not cast changes an election just as easily as a vote changed. And it's a lot easier for people to just not cast a vote. And that's what happens when we have 5 and 6 hour lines. That's what happens when people don't get their ballot in the mail. And then, I mean, at this point, you then have, let's say it's within 700. That doesn't even include the chaos of processing those ballots. I mean, how easy would it be to lose a tray of ballots? There's 250 votes in a tray. How hard would it be to lose a tray of ballots when you're moving ballots up and down elevators, crossed breezeways, 2 different buildings, 6 different locations?
So was there a secure chain of movement of ballots?
I mean, yes. So here's the thing you have to keep in mind. There was no ballot was moved unless there were 2 people. So there's always a rule. 2 people have to be there. And they have to be official election judges, and they've been sworn in, and they have to move. But even though you try to make a process like that as secure as possible, something that a lot of people don't realize is there is no such thing as 100% secure process. Our goal is to just make it as secure as we can, right? Showing up at the polls on election day, showing an ID doesn't guarantee a secure ballot, but we have to do it as best we can. And anytime a process gives you the opportunity for security breaches, just cut as many of those out as possible, right? Instead of having 25 of those, for example, let's say if we can maybe have 5. We've reduced the potential of an election having issues by 80%.
Okay, so tell us what the secret is, kind of some new technology, new paradigm that you have kind of made a name for yourself nationally for what you've done here. And it's a concept that's kind of hard to explain. So I'm going to let you do it.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. So 2 of the areas that voters tend to get underserved quite a bit. One is our overseas and military voters, and the other part is disabled voters. So our overseas and military voters, those are called UOCAVA voters. That's a federal act. It's the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Voting Accessibility. And let me tell you a little story. So my chief deputy, Josh Daniels, is a former Marine. And in 2008, if anybody remembers the election of 2008, it was a little bit of a pivotal year.
Yep.
We had Barack Obama on the Democrat side. On the Republican side, we had Mitt Romney running against John McCain. That year, I lived in Canada. I was working for Caterpillar, and I was an overseas citizen living in Canada. My chief deputy, Josh Daniels, former Marine, was actually serving in the Marine Corps in Fallujah, Iraq at the time. And in that election, I received my primary ballot for the presidential primary. And I'm Republican, so I received my ballot for John McCain and Mitt Romney. Josh in Fallujah never received his ballot for the primary. Never received it. So he didn't get a chance to vote in that primary election. I voted in the primary election. So come September, October of that year, and we're expecting to get our ballots for the for the presidential election. Josh in Fallujah received his ballot that he could cast and return. I did not receive mine.
Okay.
So obviously this system is broken, right? And I talked about how we want to reduce any security issues as much as possible, right? So we started looking at better ways for overseas citizens to cast their ballot. The alternative to snail mail, which we know is unreliable, even in a country like Canada that is better than most of the countries in the world, even when you're serving in the Marine Corps and you have the U.S. military giving you your mail, this system is broken. So the alternative was email. Hacked every day on every planet, email. And it's even worse, the State Department encourages overseas citizens and particularly military members not to use their military email account. They encourage them to use their Yahoo or their Gmail account because your ballot comes to you as an attachment, and because email is so insecure, the military will block the attachment. So they encouraged people to use a less secure email, i.e. your Gmail account, to cast your ballot. And we looked at this, said, there's no way, like, email is not a great option. So we wanted to say, let's look at new options. And we found a mobile app where you can use your phone. Now, that scares a lot of people, but let's keep in mind, their phone is where you do your banking. I mean, these same people overseas are moving their money with their phone. They're basically trusting their livelihood to their phone. So we found an app that is not 100% secure, but it's probably 100 times more secure than email, where we can verify your identity. If you use your email, we have no way to verify your identity. This way, we have, you have your thumbprint on your phone or facial recognition technology. Using the cameras, we can verify you are who you say you are. So you take a selfie, you take a picture of your government issued ID, take a picture of your face. We use facial recognition technology to test that. And then when you cast your ballot, you utilize your thumbprint or your facial recognition, and we deliver you your ballot to your phone. And then you don't actually cast your vote with your phone. It's considered a remote ballot marking device. So all you do with that is you mark your preferences. And then when you submit your preferences, they get recorded in the blockchain. And it's a blockchain that basically takes 32 different servers and it stores this in 32 places simultaneously, which means that if somebody wants to change that, they have to hack at least 17 of the 32 servers at the exact same time. And then when election day comes, we download the record from the blockchain and we actually print off your ballot and scan it with all the other votes. Now, the reason the blockchain is significant at that point is because I can take my paper copies that I've printed and I can check it against the blockchain. And I can say, is the paper that I just printed that I'm about to put through my scanner, is it the same as the record on the blockchain that's recorded in those 32 servers? And what you can do is you can take the email receipt that you received when you submitted your ballot, and you can check your email receipt against the blockchain as well. I don't know which of those votes was yours. So you remain anonymous. Your anonymity is secured. In email, you waive your anonymity, right? Like if I'm sending it to kimcoleman@yahoo.com, when you send me back your ballot, I know it's you. And the other option, I actually talked to, I sat on the airplane next to a lady from the State Department. She said last time she voted, they were in Africa. And in Africa, she filled out her ballot. It was sent to her via email. She filled it out, gave it to her husband, who then gave it to his boss, who then gave it to his secretary, who then faxed it back. So that takes away all anonymity. And how many times did that ballot pass through hands that would have changed the vote, right? So this is an opportunity for you to submit your ballot securely and have it recorded somewhere that you can then check. Did it get recorded as I wanted it to? And then I print it off and count it, and we can audit that. So I was the third jurisdiction in the country to implement this system. The only reason I wasn't the second is because Denver had their municipal election before we had ours. Otherwise, I'd have been number 2. But then we did an audit, and we audited 100% of the votes, and 100% came back clean. So what we decided to do is expand it for the disabled population. If the people with disabilities in the United States voted at the same rate as those without disabilities, we'd have over 2 million more people casting ballots every election.
Wow.
And people with disabilities are oftentimes disenfranchised when it comes to elections. And that really frustrates me. So I've now expanded the use of this for people with disabilities. A blind voter whose phone is already set up with a voiceover system set up for them, they can receive their ballot on their phone. They can use the voiceover system already on their phone. They can use their thumbprint, their facial recognition. They can submit their ballot completely independently. Whereas if we mail them a ballot, they can't see to fill that out. Someone with arthritis that can't hold a pen. We had a lady, she's 106 years old. She'll be 107 next month. And she can't hold a pen because her arthritis is so bad that her knuckles are like marbles. She was able to cast a ballot independently on her own just by pushing the buttons and hitting submit.
That's great. That's great. So that is just for these 2 designations of voters, or will this scale to everybody?
No, so it's those with disabilities, and then of course those that are overseas. Now, in the era of COVID, the definition of a disability is expanded a little bit in that if you're a vulnerable population, so technically, if you have cancer or if you have an autoimmune disease, a lot of people don't consider that necessarily a disability, except for if you don't have the ability to go to a polling location because you're immunocompromised or you're high risk. Being old doesn't necessarily just give you a disability. But in this case, if you're over 70 or you're over 60 and you're in that high risk category, it kind of does. So this, in this time, we kind of have the ability to expand that for people who maybe can't go to a polling location.
So do you see us moving from, I have on my, table at home, I get the envelope with my vote by mail ballot in it. Do you see us going fully digital and going completely paperless soon? I mean, I think we get there, but how soon?
I don't think soon. I would say my guess would be that the soonest would probably be 10 years. In elections, we want to move forward methodically and we want to do small tests, right? And we want to make sure that it's secure. There's a balance, and the balance is between security and accessibility. Gone are the days that we can say, if you aren't privileged enough to be able to stand in line for 4 hours, you don't get to vote. Like, that's not an option anymore, nor should it be. I'm the youngest of 5 whose mother was single and disabled. My mom could not have stood in line for 5 hours. She had 5 kids at home, and she was in a wheelchair for a good part of my childhood. So saying, oh, well, she doesn't get to vote because she can't stand in line for 4 hours, or she's got kids at home that she's got to take care of, that doesn't work.
Well, honestly, I don't know how many people can. I mean, time constraints, personal responsibilities, and physical ability. That's hard for anybody, really.
The key is to move forward slowly and go through this. So I was willing to try a lot of new things that a lot of elections people aren't willing to try because I had to change everything. Most election officials will change one thing at a time. And I had to change everything. So I thought, well, while we're doing it, let's try everything and see what works. It was actually ended up being really good because I now have, we have lessons learned and I have clean audits, and I've been able to work through this system so that my peers in other areas, as they're facing this COVID crisis and they don't know what to do for elections, they now can learn from my pilots. I think that's a good way to move it. Overseas citizens first, then disabled, then let's expand it to the high-risk population. Each step of the way we're learning, we're getting more secure, and then we can expand it slowly. Maybe 10 years could go digital.
Okay. So you are leading in the state of Utah. Do you talk to other county clerks around the state? I mean, you have an association. I know you do have an association of county clerks. Are they taking a cue from you? Are they learning from you? Or is there more sort of time needed to change mindset? I know you're not going to want to put down any other county clerks, but really, I guess my bottom line question is, when will this come to my county? And how do you see the whole state maybe moving? And you're the second largest county. I live in the first largest county, and I want change in that system so badly.
So 2 things cause change in elections: emergencies or crises and public demand. The last major time there was a change in elections prior to COVID was punch cards.
Yes.
And punch cards changed elections because we had hanging chads.
Hanging chads. Pregnant chads, hanging chads.
Yeah. So hanging chads. Hanging chads changed elections. Had you asked me 6 months ago, do you foresee other people in the state adopting this? My answer would have been like, oh, maybe in 5 or 10 years. But under COVID, they have to. Right? Under COVID, we have to find better and more creative ways. So I don't just work with other county clerks in the state. I work with other county clerks in the nation. And I'll give you an example with my marriage licenses. I was the first place in the country to take the marriage license process and bring it on to end-to-end online. And I had a lot of people tell me that it was unnecessary, that I had a solution looking for a problem, that I was a maverick, that this was a waste of time, that there was nothing wrong with how we'd been doing it. And then all of a sudden, COVID happened. And the same county clerks that were telling me that I was a maverick and that this was not something that was needed are literally putting the link to my website on their website because they couldn't get people marriage licenses. And when people would call and say, I need a marriage license, I'm getting married, they would say, go to Utah County, they can give you one online.
Wow. Well,
So,
I do think that is one of the, like you said, necessity is the mother of invention. Did I get that
yes,
right?
yes,
That we have a necessity, and we are seeing innovation. And I think we will have silver linings come out of this
yeah,
COVID pandemic, and part of that is stressing our systems and learning what we can do. What we can do remotely, how we can improve efficiencies, things like that. So you already had that head start on things,
yeah,
but really through all systems of government, we are seeing those systems, those processes being stressed and learning new ways to do it. Even education, that we are learning what we can do when students have to be a little bit more in the driver's seat, and we're seeing students step up in a really big way, and teachers learning or adjusting to being more facilitators than the act of teaching, and a mix of both. But everybody kind of trying to figure out how to do this under strained circumstances, and I do think we'll see some improvements after this. We talk a lot about things like in Utah, our problems with air quality, and how we would love to cut down on commuting and some of our congestion. And so we are finding ways to do much more from home, much more telecommuting. At the very least, in our public sector, we're seeing a lot more of that. I don't know what you're doing in your office in particular, but all levels of government are starting to do or have been doing more from home. And so, but you're a leader in this, and that's exciting. I'm not at all surprised. Not at all surprised.
I've been getting calls from all over the country asking, how are you doing the online marriage licenses? How did your pilots go? Can you tell us, there's been a lot of news stories about our mobile voting pilot, but of course, election officials, they want to know more than just what's in the news. They want to know
what does it cost, and what is it?
The cost, how did it exactly work? How do the security risks compare to what we're doing in other areas? There's a lot of things. Now, the other thing that's great about the technology is technology scales a lot easier than physical processes scale. So, for example, vote by mail, in order to coordinate an election of mail, I had to have my envelope orders in by December. So I've already ordered my envelopes for the year in December. And you've got people right now that are saying, oh, well, maybe we should look at vote by mail. Well, where are they going to get their envelopes? We ordered ours in December. But scaling up technology is a lot easier than cutting down more trees and getting your paper, because we had to secure our paper order for our ballots for our 300,000 registered voters in like January. And so you really can't just go down to Kinko's and be like, hey, so I have a print order. I'd like to print 300,000 ballots, and I've got 300 different ballot styles, and I've got inserts for those, and each one needs to be stuffed separately, and you have to match the envelope with the ballot. Can you get that done by Thursday?
And COVID. And then we have this other thing going on. And we have another thing going on.
It doesn't work that easily. Whereas technology, you can take existing technology and you can scale it up rather quickly.
Okay, so you used a word a second ago. You said risk and mitigating risk, and we've been talking about security and improving security. So let me ask you, what do you feel, both before you were in office, but now particularly as a county clerk, what are the biggest risks to voter election integrity? So that is definitely a concern. And, what we saw in Florida with the Chads, what we saw in Broward County, I think Broward County has like multi-generational problems.
Yeah. It's like you think that after a generation they cure their issues, but they haven't.
And the same people doing it. So really, what is still out there that voters should be concerned? I'm a candidate. What should I be concerned about? We are talking a lot about, there's a constant debate about voter ID. There's a lot of discussion lately about vote harvesting. Can you touch on some of those things? What are still the ongoing risks to election integrity? How can we mitigate that in our state? And now you're doing that, though. But for everybody else that isn't doing the Gardner way, the Utah County way, how can we have better assurances?
So I used to think, and most people think, that the biggest threat to our elections is hacking. They think it's someone hacking into the system and changing the votes. And I'm telling you, that's actually not anywhere near the biggest risk. Is it a risk? Yeah, it is. And would people love to hack into our elections and do that? Yes. But we separate our election systems from the internet. Our tabulating machines, the machines we use for tabulation, they don't ever touch the internet. They never have touched the internet. They never will touch the internet. They're completely unconnected. And on top of that, we have some of the smartest people in the nation at the Department of Homeland Security, at CISA, at the FBI, at the state, the Lieutenant Governor's office in our state, Secretary of State's office in other states, and at every level of government. We're fighting online attacks. So our reinforcements against that are really high, and the likelihood of that actually happening are very low. We actually don't have any record of that having happened. What is a bigger risk is people casting fraudulent votes, which is very different than hacking. So it's actually two areas. One is not only casting fraudulent votes, but people not voting. Remember, a vote not cast changes an election just as much as a vote cast fraudulently. So those are the two things we have to look at. When we look at protecting our elections, we can't protect them so much that we disenfranchise people, because when we do that, we affect the outcome just as much. So that's where I look at it from a clerk's standpoint. I've changed from thinking that Russian hackers are the biggest issue to that I need to ensure that people have an opportunity to vote and that people that are voting should. It's crazy to me that some places don't require an ID to vote. We require an ID to get on an airplane, to purchase liquor, to go into an event. There is not a financial burden to an ID like most people would think there is. If you can drive a car, you have to have an ID. Like I said, if you want to purchase tobacco or liquor, you have to have an ID. The Democratic National Committee, the DNC, to go to the Democratic National Convention, you have to show an ID. So it's crazy to me that the organization that is saying, oh, it's oppressive to have to show an ID, requires an ID to go to their annual conference. So one of them would be an ID. The second would be to have clean voter rolls. Make sure that the people that are registered to vote are actually valid and registered to vote.
Okay, so let me stop you right there. Okay, so if you're watching this, how can people make sure that they are accurately on the rolls? And especially because we have in Utah, if you want to participate in the Republican primary, you have to be a registered Republican voter. So if you want to get that ballot in the mail, you want to get notification, then you need to make sure you are accurately registered. How do they do that, Amelia?
Vote.utah.gov. If you're in Utah, it's really easy online. Go to vote.utah.gov and check your voter registration. And if you are not a registered Republican and you want to vote in the Republican,
I'm going to ask my helpers here, my volunteers, to put that in the thread so that people can find that.
Yeah.
Okay, vote.utah.gov.
So it's a big one. Go to vote.utah.gov. The other part of that is you need to have an elections office that is constantly updating voter rolls. So one of the things we do is we check NCOA lists, which those are the National Change of Address Database. And we're constantly checking the change of address database. And if people have moved, then we mail them. If they've put in a change of address with the post office, we mail them a postcard that says, we have record that you have moved, and we will be moving your voter registration. If for some reason you did not move, please contact us.
Is everybody doing that across the state?
No. In fact, my office didn't do that since 2012 until I took office in 2019. There was a 7-year period of time that did not happen. That's probably the biggest thing that causes people to not get their ballot and causes them not to vote. Or when they show up at the polls on election day, they're registered in the wrong area and they're getting the wrong ballot, and then they have to cast what's called a provisional ballot. And those are more difficult. And by the way, in June, the June primary, we are not allowed to do provisional ballots because of COVID. So if you're registered to vote party affiliation on election day, but you can't cast a provisional ballot.
Okay, so that is a warning and an encouragement to voters. I'm a candidate for Congress in this upcoming June primary. If you want to vote in that primary for me, if you want to vote, you need to be a registered Republican. What's the deadline for that, Amelia?
11 days before the election, and the election is on June 30th, so the 19th.
Okay, June 19th. So register before June 19th. Okay.
Register and or change party affiliation. So the biggest, I really think voter ID and clean voter lists are the biggest thing affecting valid voters. And then the flip side of that is voter suppression. Long lines cause voter suppression. People not getting their ballots in the mail cause voter suppression. Not enabling the disabled population to vote.
Okay, should we be concerned about things like ballot harvesting?
Yes.
What is that, quickly?
So ballot harvesting is when someone goes around and collects ballots and turns them in. One of the most famous ways this happens is in retirement communities. People will go into a retirement community and help all the people in the retirement community fill out their ballots, and then they'll collect all those ballots and then they'll turn them in. That's ballot harvesting. So this is one reason why I like, the mobile option is if someone can read their phone or they have a voiceover technology on their phone, they can cast their ballot independently. Ballot harvesting is illegal in some states. It's 100% legal in other states, which is just crazy. But ballot harvesting is when you basically go around and collect ballots. Sometimes people are trying to be helpful. Sometimes it might just be a neighbor trying to be helpful, but sometimes they're nefarious and they're helping people fill out their ballots and basically unduly influencing the way they vote and then collecting those ballots and turning them in.
Okay. We have a couple more minutes, but we have to hit on something because I'm running for Congress against Ben McAdams. And we know the really big bad vote that he cast to impeach our president, but there's another one that I think is pretty dang bad. But I think it kind of flew under the radar. We heard about H.R. 1. I think the most we heard about that bill was that, it would allow 16-year-olds to vote. And we all went, okay, that's crazy. Okay, that's not half the crazy.
Crazy things,
that is not half the crazy that's in that bill. And Ben McAdams voted for this. So what are your top 3, Amelia, of what was so crazy bad? Really, there's some offensive things in that bill, and it would have taken some of your authority away and would have federally bureaucratized our elections because the feds can do things better than we can in Utah County and in our state.
One of the reasons that effectively hacking an election has never occurred is because elections are run on the local level. And elections are run on the local level on purpose. Number one, because then you know the people running your elections. But number two, there is an inherent security in that. If we have 29 counties in the state of Utah and we have 29 counties running elections, then there isn't a single place running the elections. If you want to hack a Utah election, you got to hack 29 counties, right?
Right.
You take that across the country, there's inherent security in the fact that we run elections locally. That helps us. To me, the biggest problem with HR 1 is that it would have been a federal takeover of elections. And that would have taken away the oversight of our individual communities, and it would have put all of the elections in one system that creates immense vulnerability. I mean, it's just outlandish. That the takeover of elections is probably the biggest one there, the federal takeover of elections. So that's one. A second thing in there was this 16. I mean, bringing the vote down to 16. We've got people that can't legally sign a cell phone contract, and they can't drive a car without their parents' permission, but we want them voting. It just doesn't quite make sense there. And then I think probably the last one would be funding candidates for office, using taxpayer dollars to fund candidates all across the nation. I mean, the amount of money that would cost would be outlandish.
Now, if you want to donate to my race, you can go to kimforutah.com and donate there. But no way should the government take money out of your pocket and disperse it and distribute it among candidates that you may or may not choose. And, oh, there she is! So I want to put a bookmark right here. Our current Congressman, Ben McAdams, voted to do this, voted to take that local control, that local oversight, that local ability to ensure more security at that level. Our principles of federalism and having that, our states having that sovereignty, that authority, that local control over things. He voted to do this, voted to have taxpayer dollars fund candidates, 16-year-old voting and taking. Look at Amelia. Who would want to trust what she's done so amazingly well in Utah County that is a model for this country? But let's go send it to some federal bureaucrats to manage and secure our elections. Just absolutely outrageous. I hope everybody remembers that. And again, some of the great things that Amelia's reminded us, vote.utah.gov. And if you want to vote in this primary, and we've got the Democrats are actively promoting that Democrats re-register as Republicans to step in and try to influence our party's nomination. And it's not even stealth anymore. It's not even sort of like the backroom whispers. It is in the Deseret News, right? This is being encouraged. And, it's not against the law. You have the right to associate how you want on your ballot. But that this is, I want you to know the tactics that are out there now to influence this November election. And so this is maybe the most famous political baby in the state, Baby G. Hello. Hi.
Hi, Kim.
Okay, there she is. Okay, that's a perk of being an elected official, even just being a part-time legislator. That I will come in and talk to your baby and hold your baby if you let me. But I know this one. So anyway, well, Amelia, thank you so much for being with us tonight. What any final words you might want for the people to know and watch and think about?
Yeah, I think one of the final words I've got for you is that register to vote, make sure your voter registration is up to date. And if you want change in your local elections, the best way to push that is through your local county clerk. Get to know your county clerk and let them know you want change. They're waiting for a crisis before they want to change. If you want change, let them know that you want that change. That's what's going to drive it. And then make sure your voter registration is up to date.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much. Very informative. So proud of you and everything you're doing there in Utah County. So please go and subscribe at Kim Coleman and click the bell for notifications. I got cue cards now. Click the bell for notifications. Find us on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube. KimForUtah.com, and we'd love to hear your questions. We'll check the feed and see if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to respond. But thanks again for joining us tonight. Thank you again so much, Amelia, and have a great night.